Hello there, I'm KnightLightnin.
And I'm WhoFartd.
And together we are
Fortnite
Gamers. We have a special guest here today, the legendary Dan Cool, who is new to Disney Sorcerer's Arena. So he's going to be learning along with the rest of us. You want to say anything, Dan Cool?
I thank you guys for bringing me on, and we'll learn as you go, I guess.
And I would just add in, you may know him from Marvel Strike Force. You may know him from Star Wars Galaxy Heroes. You may also know him from My Little Pony Adventures. He's a veteran of many a game. You also may know him as the king of the autoplay.
King of the autoplay.
Exactly.
No one autoplays like Dan Cool does.
A game automatically acquires autoplay when he signs up.
Exactly.
As Zack Ryder says, woo, 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 you know it.
All right, folks, well, welcome back. Today we're going to go over spells and secrets that are buried inside the game that most of people just don't know are there. So, as a disclaimer, once again, we are offensive. We use naughty language. So if you are easily offended or turned off by cursing and R-rated type of material, go to somebody else's channel.
And remember, if kids are in the room, earmuffs.
Earmuffs, yes. And for those who want to hone in on specific parts of our discussion, timestamps will be underneath in the bottom of the description. Okay, so my friends, we are going over spells, but before we get to that, we have discovered, incidentally, the ultimate secret to Disney Sorcerer's Arena. And that is this gear button right up here. Now, if you press this and we go to customer care, check this out. Let's go to the battle section. Oh, look at this. Status effects. The whole list is here. I accidentally discovered this because I was going to submit a ticket for something, and every single definition of every status effect, even if it's specific to one individual character.
Oh, if you already saw, we passed the pumpkin shield, which is only applicable to one character.
Exactly. Triton's Boon, same thing. Yep. So literally every single definition in the game is here. Now, disclaimer though, some of this can be a little bit misleading. For example, I have discovered through my own testing, tactics, it says, chance occurrences on the affected character's abilities are guaranteed. I have discovered, testing with several characters, including Genie and Mickey, that does not apply to passive abilities. So it must just be active. I don't know if that is not appropriately typed, but as far as what the written word does versus the intent, it does not operate that way. But that's kind of normal in games, especially when it's newer. But, for example, we're discussing spells. Oh, you have the Headless Horseman. It inflicts fear. How the hell do you find out what fear does? It's right here. Affected character will not be able to dodge or resist enemy attacks or effects. So this is nice because, yes, you could Google and find these definitions on Reddit or in your Discord server, but it's nice that the game actually has this in here somewhere.
And the other thing, I would recommend click on spell charge. This is the thing that I finally got confirmed from this. Spells charge quicker the more damage that's received. So that's never defined anywhere. This is the first place that officially says the more you get hit, the quicker the spell charge.
Right. So, Dankel, have you noticed in your battles as a newer player, sometimes your spells charge lightning quick and sometimes they take a longer time?
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Well, this is really what defines that. So in terms of strategy with spell, and we're going to get to spell strategies themselves, but when you go into battle, it's not always best to start off with those AoE area of effect attacks that hit everybody, because you are supercharging the opponent's turn meter. Now, again, when we're doing most PvE, like Club Dungeon or Towers of Endurance, things like that, you don't have to worry about this at all. But you have to keep in mind, every time you do an area of effect attack with a character, you're supercharging the other person's spells. So they're likely, if you're going first, you're doing AoE, 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 they're going to get off their spells faster than you are, most likely. So here we go. Let's get right into it. So we have a bunch of spells in the game. The first two, I think, or three everybody gets. You know, we have this wonderful magical meteor right here. Eventually we go over to Duke Kaboom, I think you get pretty early on, as well as the Triggers Tower. So, Mike, talk to me about timing of spells.
So it's interesting that you started out with on one of the most common spells that timing does not matter, because I'll start out with that. So there's certain spells that trigger characters that are exempt from this conversation. The second you get them out, the better. So there is no real time skill set. But the other thing to take into account, along with and exclude this character and Bucket of Soldiers, is that when you do a spell, it's as important as the type of spell you're doing. Because, for example, if your enemy has a Taunter on their back line, and they've got 3 characters up front, 2 on the back line.
Right.
Now, you do an attack like the Headless Horseman. That's only going to attack your back line. So it's going to limit, you're only going to attack 2 characters. And on top of it, if one of those is Taunters, that's your bulkiest character. So you're not going to really get the amount of damage from the spell as if you had used it on the front line. So waiting till a Taunter is available is very important. So flanking, as is being written out on the screen, just in case you weren't sure, is also another thing that you have to take into account. How you're going to attack the characters and the angle of attack additionally. So it's not only when you use a spell, but it's who do you want to target, who is the least amount of health, and how is the angle you're going to chain multiple attacks together.
Exactly. And thank you for pointing that out. When we think flanking, we want to think rows. So you're either taking out characters in the back row, or you're taking out characters in that front row. This is also important when you start summoning characters. For example, if you summon, say, a Triggers Tower in the back, and someone uses a flanking spell, this is going to attack that row as opposed to the front. So you have to consider this. One thing you do in PvE is once you figure out what spells somebody has, like for example, in Sorcerer's Tournament, I believe you can see the kinds of spells that your opponents use. So that is something to consider as well, of what kind of things are they using. So if they have, like, say, the Headless Horseman or Iago that use flanking, if you say summon Raja in the back row, is not a bad idea, because when they use a flanking spell against Raja, it's going to hit him, it's going to hit the back row here. As opposed to if you summon Raja in the front, you're going to be hitting your character here, here, and here. So that's your 3 major characters as opposed to 2 major characters. And again, this changes as we get into adjacent and other kinds of attacks, but it's one of the many kind of nuances that goes into these spell choices.
Now, you have some interesting strategies when it comes to how to set up those attacks properly. Would you like to elaborate a little more?
Well, let's say, for example, I mean, it's interesting because when you get, the first thing to look at is you have to look at possible summons, right? So in triggers, the thing to look at, if we have our 5 main characters on your team and the offense team, something to realize is when summons happen, where are those other positions? So for example, if we use this grid as an example, we have a summon position behind Mickey, a summon in front of Jack, a summon behind Ariel, summon in front of Aladdin, summon behind Jasmine. So it's not 5 actual positions. There's actually 10 potential positions where you can summon things. So as an example, let's say you wanted to summon a creature here, right? As an example. Or let's say even here, we're flanking, we're kind of going at Jace right next to Ariel, right? When you use an attack, let's say you use Duke-a-Boom to hit Aladdin, right? You're going to capture these adjacent characters here, right? And let's say you switch it to the other side and you were to attack Jack Sparrow. You're going to capture Ariel, that new summon creature, as well as Mickey and Jack in that. So when you're dealing with adjacent attackers, you have all of these crazy potential possibilities of who you can hit. By the way, disclaimer, if anybody sees subliminal messages in this video, just chalk that up to your imagination. So Mike, in terms of that as well, when you have a tank, who do you have to be worried about when you face this kind of team?
Well, obviously Ariel, because of for healing, you want to make sure to eliminate Ariel right away.
Okay, so we want to put this right between these sections, right on Ariel. That's what you're saying.
And it may be harder than it seems.
Harder, how hard is it, Mike, exactly?
Very, very hard.
Very hard.
Don't get me wrong, it's always stiff competition in this game, but it's even harder in this case.
That's true. I mean, the issue, too, is the sensitivity that you may be dealing with. You know, sometimes you have to go a little harder or softer depending on the sensitivity of your opponent in these kinds of situations.
I completely agree.
Right. So, again, with adjacent, you're dealing with, let's say you go after Mickey as an example, you're only going to be capturing Jack Sparrow in that hit right there. As opposed to when you're, say you focus on Ariel, you're going to be capturing these other characters in your adjacent. This is why it's a good idea with, say, you summon a tank or you have a tank on the screen, it's good to keep your tanks on the opposite ends, because if somebody hits, let's say they attack Jasmine, right? She's going to only hit any adjacent attack that's attacking Jasmine is going to capture Aladdin in that sphere. As opposed to, let's say you had your tank in the middle where Ariel's position is in, you're going to get 3 people hit as opposed to 2. So, like, again, if you're summoning Raja, I tend to summon Raja right around here. So I'll have, like, a Jasmine or my Big Bad Wolf or someone who's very tough, who has a lot of health in these kinds of spots here to be careful of those positions. You really wouldn't want to summon anything here in the back, I don't think, because, again, if, you know, you can call this, you know, an extra thing, because if somebody, unless they go attack Jack Sparrow or Mickey, or they go and try to eliminate Jasmine, for example, if they hit right in that middle section right here, right behind Ariel, you're going to get Jack, Ariel, Aladdin, and your summon hit. So there's really, that is the worst possible spot, in my opinion, to summon anything. What do you think, Mike?
I always try to get Jack off the screen right away.
Jack off the screen?
Yes.
Okay. That's a good point. So we want to get rid of Jack right away. Because that charm, he's pretty charming, don't you think?
Of course. Dan Cool is always charmed by him.
My concern is Mickey as well.
Understandably so. That combination is very dangerous.
Yeah, because, you know, again...
But how would you attack the other people on the screen after you've eliminated Jack and Mickey?
That's tough, because once you deal with... You know what it is? A large part of this game has to do with control. One reason... Even if I see like Shan Yun or Big Bad Wolf or somebody on the opposite team, a lot of times I'll go after Jack, because if he charms one of my major characters, not only am I sacrificing a turn, he's going off and hitting somebody, and it's just a time killer. And, you know, the name of the game is speed. So, I mean, you could use flanking attacks, for example, that could try to hit the rest of that row.
Yes.
You know, one nice thing about the Headless Horseman or Iago is they do it hard and fast. I'm talking really hard, really fast. The nice thing about Iago versus Headless Horseman, when you get him, it's an easy substitute in my opinion, because even though Headless Horseman does add silent, Iago charges very quickly. And that is another important thing to keep in mind when we talk about spells. So let's look at some of our spells, for example. Mike, let me ask you this. when is a bad time to use a spell?
So I would say, back to what I was said, usually when Taunters are up, depending on the type of attack of the spell, and also early on is not always the key to an effective spell. An effective spell is when the opponent is at their weakest, or you can potentially eliminate a character that is coming up for a big hit. So, for example, let's take Big Bad Wolf.
Yeah.
Heavy hitter, but slow. If you can time a spell to eliminate an extra Big Bad Wolf turn, that's far more effective than just hitting multiple characters and just bringing down 10% of everybody's health.
Right. When you even the one thing that's tough, right, after the nerf, because for example, Dumbo used to blind the entire side. Now he only blinds the primary target. So what that means is if the primary target is aerial, even though Dumbo is dealing damage to everybody, the only person that's actually going to get blind is this one target. So if let's say the person taunting, right, is actually the tank, which it usually is, unless someone's got like a Dr. Facilier thing going on, where you're force taunting like defensive or support characters. That is almost always not the person you want to blind with Dumbo. So the tough thing with Dumbo these days is if you get stuck behind a taunt and you just generated the Dumbo spell, you're going to be tempted to use it right away to deal damage, but you really have to take a look at how far up is the person in turn going to go? Like, are they going next? In which case, do you want to use blind right away? Or, hey, is their taunt going to end really soon? So you got to really look at the timing. One of the most important parts of the game is when you're in battle is this bottom left section down here when you're in combat, because that's going to show you your turn order. And for those of you who are not aware, that's expandable, so you can see at least three or four next turns.
Yep.
That's coming up. So,
it's a minimum depending on your screen size of 4.
Right. So as an example, one thing that's important when determining when to use a spell is can I target the person I really want to finish off? Because unless you have like an Iago who's really one of the, I take it back. I'm thinking Iago before the nerf. Actually, the only spell that does what I'm thinking now that I know offhand is Mortal Potion. Mortal Potion is very useful because it is one of the only spells left in the game that actually removes taunt. So I'll give you an example. Let's imagine my Aladdin is, I don't know, Mordu. Okay, so let's just pretend that. Let's say my Mortal Potion generates, but Mordu hasn't taunted yet in battle. A lot of times I'll sit a round or two until Mordu does his taunt so I can use Mortal Potion, then eliminate his taunt and go back to killing somebody else that you really need to focus on. In terms of, let's see some of the other spells. I would say Trigger's Tower, Infinity Die, a lot of the Meteor spell, and probably this explosive spell, the Thunder Mountain Boom. Is there any reason to wait for any of those, or should you just go as soon as possible?
Thunder Mountain Boom is an interesting one that you bring up. So the reasoning being is because you want to set it up if you're not going to get a chance to trigger it twice, which is very hard in long battles. You want to set it up so that it's going to be either on the second or last turn that your opponent plays, because that way they lose a key battle time period. So later, it's always effective as long as you've got it to level 2, because the stun and the damage, but it's even more effective if you can time their turn that they lose.
That's interesting. So I would have thought Thunder Mountain Boom, you throw it out as soon as you get there, but you're saying there is an advantage to actually waiting to use this?
It depends on who you're battling. So if you're doing a regular non-arena or tournament-based battle, then you can use it at any time. But once you start getting that next level strategy, timing it so it's at the most inopportune turn that they lose is key.
Interesting. Now, I don't have this spell because I joined the game too late, but you are my go-to for understanding this spell, Bucket of Soldiers. And anyone who started this game in the last, say, 3 to 4 weeks, what we've all experienced when we're first leveling up, say level 10, 20, and so forth, and start doing those PvE battles, anytime someone summoned the Bucket of Soldiers, it was just game over for me. And I imagine
it was a flat-out TKO.
It's the same way.
It is great because I have it, but if you don't have it, for the longest while, it was the best spell for early game, and I think that we're going to see it revive because we're going to see a lot of people the next time it comes around hitting level 4, which means that each of those little army guys do about 700 damage when you're facing a normal 40 to 50 level team. Now you're going to be dealing 2,100 damage when you hit level 4. Which is crazy. That's a top hit for a lot of characters, and you'll do that on every single basic attack.
Right. Now, let me ask you this. When you summon Bucket of Soldiers, is there a particular spot you like to summon into?
So I run a team with Shan Yu, Aladdin, Big Bad Wolf, why am I forgetting his name? Jack Sparrow, and Jasmine. And I normally, on the right-hand side of my screen, I have Shan Yu and Aladdin. So I usually put it right between those two because if you target that bucket, it's between two guys who have the most health.
Right.
I keep the bucket as far away as I can from Big Bad Wolf and Jack Sparrow.
That makes sense. Yeah. And that's the thing, because if you're dealing with someone who has, like, Duke Kaboom as an adjacent attack, you know this spot is vulnerable when you attack if you summon something in this section, as opposed to what we said again, is summon something back here and someone uses like a Duke Kaboom or something that does adjacent damage, you're going to capture a lot of your team incidentally in that sphere of attack. And I know you use Trigger Tower too, right?
So I am actually just starting to get away from Trigger Tower just because I've got the Thunder Boom, Big Mount, whatever it is, the Dynamite. So I'm using Trigger Tower less, but Trigger Tower and Bucket of Soldiers is a great combination just because I have Bucket of Soldiers right now at level 1. So it's going to do even more damage as I bring it up. But Trigger Tower adds another relatively quick character that will allow you to combine with Bucket of Soldiers on a regular attack because all of Trigger Tower's attacks are regular attacks.
Right, and this is the thing. That's also something that can be the difference between player versus environment versus player, right? Because
exactly
in PvP Arena, if Trigger Towers, unless it's one of your few spells as your option, which is, one reason I ran Trigger Tower forever is because it was just a spell I got to level 2, and I didn't really have a lot of other options, so it was good for me. Trigger's Tower or Bucket of Soldiers, things that summon in general are amazing in PvE because let's say I'm summoning something here and something else here. The computer is going to randomly decide to maybe attack these instead of your main characters because those are expendable summons, I guess. Those are expendable kind of new characters you're adding onto your main team. What you don't want is your main guys getting killed off, right? So one thing that's so advantageous about Trigger's Tower, Bucket of Soldiers, even the Cauldron that you summon is that it provides a new target potentially to the AI of the game or the computer of the game to just randomly go and attack those. But almost never will that work in the PvP arena because you're facing an actual human being. So you can have your summons all over the place, but almost never you're going to find a player that's like, oh yeah, I'll target the Bucket of Soldiers. No, I'm going to target the characters, get rid of those, and then leave Bucket of Soldiers for last.
Exactly.
Okay, so moving on. I'll tell you this, when Frozen is out now, I've been using Iago and Mortal Potion. Mortal Potion has been my go-to because it is one of my only ways with my team to eliminate Taunt. So I'm either going to go hard at Sven or Elsa and try to get rid of one of them as fast as possible, but as soon as those taunts go up, it completely derails your entire strategy. So that is why Mortal Potion is in my repertoire at the moment, and why I decided to unlock it. I saved up a lot of currency in order to do so. And honestly, it's been a big help. I've lost a lot of matches, but they have been much closer battles than they would have without being able to remove taunts. And I have been able to win against a Frozen team recently. It was a 6-star Frozen team, and believe it or not, with my squad, who are, I'll show you who they are, these guys, right? So if I go into battle, whoever, this is the team I'm using. And this team should not really be able to take on a Frozen team, especially me. Like, I just got Big Bad Wolf to 6-star, and I have Mickey at 6-star, but everybody else is 5-star, and everybody is Gear 5. I should not be able to even have a chance against a 6-star Frozen team, but we're getting there. We're still figuring out potential counters, but, you know, meta is definitely something to consider.
No, completely agree. And the fact is, I don't even bother with Frozen teams right now, because running a fast Kingdom team, I clearly lose in most instances. But I have not used Mortal Potion, and something that I'm starting to look at now. But part of me, what kind of scares me is, I feel like because they've run now back-to-back, let's call it retro events.
Yes.
I think that in the near future, there'll be a new event that will change everything.
I agree. And, you know, they got to keep things evolving and moving, and they're going to bring other characters to the game. I mean, I made the decision not to really farm any of the Frozen characters. I don't really have any sentimental attachments to them, so that's one reason. But also, I have so many farming priorities. Like, besides my main team, I want to get Downtown Villains. I want to start working on some wilds, but, you know, fortunately, I made the choice to not farm Frozen. And honestly, that has hurt me, because now we need wilds for the Crystal Challenge, right?
So, exactly. But here's my question. Coming from a newer player perspective, Dan Cool, what are you farming?
What I'm farming right now is I'm really just like focusing on like some of the main characters, like that are like, you know, like Aladdin or Shinyu, instead of like spreading the farming across the board.
So you have not looked at Frozen at all?
I mean, I have looked at it, but I'm not really farming it like right now.
Okay. Completely random. I just unlocked Spirit Mufasa, and I didn't even know that.
Wow. Well done. That's
So
really
that
cool.
was cool.
I know that spell just got nerfed, though, recently.
I read that. I wasn't really sure. Oh, and I hit a lifetime achievement. I collected 12 spells.
Wow. Very nice.
Nice.
Yeah, so, you know, as we unlock more spells, I mean, look, because the fact of the matter is I can read every spell and advise someone theoretically how to use certain things, but you know what? We're in an environment now where they've changed like the way 5 or 6 spells work. So you got to kind of take this in as a grain of salt, and that's why we're not talking so specifically about, oh, this is how you use this spell specifically in all instances, or going through the whole list, because we're just trying to go through our thought process of tactically what might be a good time to use these spells, and that even though you have a spell ready, you may not want to pull the trigger right away, because these spells could change. So rather than just tell people exactly how to use these spells, we're giving them, I think, the ideas that we have of the decision-making process. So this way, as things change, people can go through by themselves to do stuff. We've seen a lot of YouTube videos of some interesting channels out there who are like, oh, these are the top 5 spells. These are the top 10 spells. That's great, but, you know, as we see, like a week later, that could be completely outdated. But also, you're not really telling me how to use that spell. Like, I'm looking at Golden Hammer at the moment to maybe farm, but I haven't seen any videos on what's the best way to use that? So we're just going to have to use that ourselves. Side note.
So I would just like to, even before you jump into that, I'd like to hear from people listening to the video if they'd like to see specifics on how to use specific spells, because that could be, let's call it subtopics in the future through each different video. So I'm curious to see what the public wants.
Yeah, and something that's interesting too is one thing that happened to me a few weeks ago is when I beat the Tower of Endurance, which is Tower 2, I immediately regretted it because while I got access to new spells, the problem was I got completely stuck on the Kingdom and Oceanic required Tower of Endurance 3 tower, which is Tower 3. I could not beat the first 2 levels for a week, and it took me a long time to beat it. And as you see, I have over 31,000 of the Tower Exchange currency. Why is that? What I'm doing right now, again, I don't have Wilds characters. So I looked ahead and into what the description of the next section is, and I saw that Tower 4, you need Downtown and you need Wilds. And I do not have very strong Wilds or Downtown. So I could beat this tower anytime. I had a battle 3 days ago where one more click of a button, it would have been over. Rather than doing that, I just restarted and did the first 9 levels again. And my thought is I'm going to build up my Downtown and Wilds team to take on Tower 4. But in the meantime, I'm going to get myself an extra 900 currency every day until I think I'm really almost ready to beat Tower 4 and then make the switch. WhoFartd, you got any opinions on that?
So I have a contrary perspective on this.
Okay.
In the sense that Tower 3, the Tower of Endurance 3, and Tower Endurance 5, the spells are so powerful that you get, it's almost worth unlocking them and then dealing with the fact that you can't get further or you can't gain much than just banking that currency. And I'd also like to say, I'll speak from my personal thing. I hate doing the Tower of Endurance. It's boring. I don't want to do it. I do the minimum to get my daily, and then I forget about it. And it sits at the same levels normally. So I'm not maximizing the chance to gain more currency there. Now, I know that's not optimal, and I know that I could put it on auto, but I don't think that that's the best timing for me. So I got the pan shadow spell as quickly as I could.
That makes sense too, because look, it's the same. The reason you didn't stay and kind of keep hoarding that Tower 3 currency, or what anybody could do for any towers, Tower 2 or 1, is the same reason I didn't farm Frozen. I just didn't want to do it. I'm just not interested. And so you have to have this balance of efficiency and what we used to call min-maxing in a game versus actually enjoying yourself.
So I'm curious, for a more beginner player perspective, Dan Cool, what are you doing with the Tower of Endurance?
Well, right now, I'm in Tower 2, and I can't, get all the way through it because I, for some reason, run into a jam, and, I lose my key guys, and then I would have to, restart the whole thing.
So my question is, are you actually playing it, or are you autoing it?
I'm autoing.
Okay.
That's awesome.
Do you think actually playing it through yourself would give you an advantage?
Well, I mean, maybe one day we'll, you guys will explain the whole mechanics of the game.
Of attacking and winning?
No, the whole mechanics part of the whole part of the game.
So in other words, maybe there's a chance for a future video of helping Dan Cool pass the Tower of Endurance 2.
That's possible. That's possible, for sure. Let's get into this conversation. because I want to talk about this. What's interesting, what's kind of surprising to me was not that they brought this into the game, but that the first event was only like 2 or 3 days.
Yes.
Crystals. Now, I know everybody is saying go out and farm wilds right now because we have crit power, offense, and recovery stones available with those wilds. Here's my hesitation. When you tell me you need wilds to get crit power, offense, and recovery, I think, okay, are wilds going to be needed for speed, for example?
So that's a good point.
Probably, I'm thinking mythical or oceanic. So I'm wondering, you know, these games, the way they do it, they give you an event, they put a clock on it, right? So it's to pressure you to spend money, which is fine. But there's always a bigger, shinier carrot, so to speak, right around the corner.
So
right after you've done that.
To that point, anyone who played Star Wars Galaxy Heroes took lessons from Michelangelo Battio. And Matt, what was that primary lesson he taught us?
Speed kills.
Exactly.
For those who don't know, Michelangelo Battio, just YouTube speed kills, and yeah, you're gonna see some sick guitar work.
The quad guitar that comes down from the heavens to his hands.
Exactly. So one thing I'm concerned about, if I go all in on wilds right now, is that I'll do it and then they'll say, oh, well, guess what? Here is a new crystal event and you need some random, completely different team. So I feel like rather than be behind in the wilds farming, I'd rather be ahead in something else like mythical. I mean, I know eventually I'll need mythical to do the Tower 5 event, I think.
And I'd like to throw out one thing here, a caveat to what you're saying. There are certain wild characters that I think have value regardless. Now, this breaks KnightLightnin's previous no frozen rule. But Sven and Kristoff have value for Tower 4, have value for the stones, and have value for anything wild related. Plus, they are a combination that does phenomenal whether you have any more frozen characters or not. So they carry standalone value that I think makes farming for them early on worthwhile more than any other wild short of Mordu.
I have to, look, I absolutely have to agree with that. And it's for another reason, which is they're also actually farmable characters. Exactly. I would love to farm Shere Khan, but I'm just in the middle. I think I just beat that node today. And I don't know if I 3-starred it or not, but getting up to it alone is really tough.
So right now I've changed over that I am farming. All right, I have not watched Frozen in detail, so I don't know which one's Sven, which one's Kristoff. But the dude towards the bottom, I'm farming him right now regularly.
Kristoff.
All right, he's now got a name. Kristoff. I would have guessed that he was Sven, but that shows you how much I've watched Frozen.
No, the problem is when you think of, if you close your eyes and think of the word Sven, you think of like blue-eyed, blonde hair, tall,
Swedish, like Nordic.
Yeah, like in a way that Kristoff doesn't quite have that same punch.
When I think the name Kristoff, and this is going to be really obscure, if you remember the movie Eurotrip, the guy who is going after Michelle Trachtenberg at the clubs, his name was Kristoff.
Well, okay, there you go. So what you're saying is Sven is Michelle Trachtenberg?
Yes.
That definitely paints a different picture.
I don't think I'll ever look at Sven again in the same way after making that comparison.
I don't think I will either.
And I think there's probably an impending lawsuit that somebody's going to misconstrue the fact that I was making a movie reference and somehow ended up comparing Michelle Trachtenberg to a moose just out of relation to another character named Kristoff?
It's very South Park of you, actually.
Only difference is mine was completely unintentional, and Matt and Trey from South Park, I don't think there's anything they do that is not intentional.
Yeah, that's true. But, yeah, I think Farming Wilds is good. I mean, I'm going to need at least 1 or 2 Wilds characters for the Tower event of Tower 4, but I'm trying to avoid going all in on Wilds because I think it's going to be slight. I think it's going to – people are going all out on Wilds might regret it in a few weeks if they say, oh, all that farming you've been doing? Well, the speed crystals, you need X. And isn't it too bad you spent all that time and energy on all these other characters? So
I didn't hear a single thing you just said.
Okay, then.
Terrific.
Moving on. We have should we go to our fake news segment of the
It is fake real news time.
Fake real news, yes. That's correct.
To quote a guy I saw who had a sign in New York City was selling handbags, it's time for the real, artificial, genuine, fake leather handbag time.
Well, look, the fact is, our characters may not come to the game, but they might. And why can't we give the devs ideas, right?
I think this is the rare time. As much as I am banging my desk, and you can't see my desk, but it's a wooden desk, and I'm banging on it, for Hobo Jafar, I think this is the first character that is probably incoming in this game in the next year that will not only be one that is interesting, but it will be one that will be potentially game changer because of the powers that Cheshirecat has in the Alice in Wonderland potential meta.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely think he's going to be mythical for sure. Let's go over his basic. Mischievous Grin. So this guy makes all kinds of mischief, and he always appears, and his mouth appears first, and when he disappears, it's the last thing you see. So what do you think Mischievous Grin is going to do?
So I would love to kick this right now to Dang Cool, the man of so many words throughout this video. We can't even keep him quiet for more than 2 seconds. Let's hear what you have to say. He's been on mute the entire time, and you just haven't noticed it.
I don't have much to say, because what you guys are coming up with is totally, ridiculous.
Ridiculous how?
Actually, this is fake news. This is direct from the dev. So this is a real incoming character we have here.
So get excited. Dang Cool, what would Mischievous Grin do right now? 5 words or less right off your mind. Is 1.
I really don't know.
You've already passed your 5. I'm sorry, you lose.
I think he's going to spread a new debuff around called Madness or Mad, right?
I think that one's that makes sense. Or what I was curious about, and this may be tying into head games, but I think there's going to be something that is going along with that Madness buff, is that it's going to stop you from being able to control your target. So you're going to, let's say you're facing your opponent, you don't know whether you're going to target somebody on the 5th spot or the 1st spot, and you're going to lose control of that. So I think that's how Madness is going to work with this Mischievous Grin.
Interesting. So it's like Charm, but instead of targeting your own team, your attack is random to a target.
Exactly.
That is really cool. I like that a lot. I think that's really good. For his special, not all there. Obviously, this has multiple meanings because this cat is not all there. In the world he lives in, the people are not all there. But this clearly refers to his disappearing act, where he disappears. Here's a question. Can this be a character that can change his location on the field?
So That's why to say not all there, I thought of, is that he separates kind of into 3 different characters with 3 different health amounts, that when you eliminate one, it brings them all back together, but it takes up different parts.
Interesting. Now, what if you kill one of the parts? What happens, do you think?
So I would assume it condenses it all back into one, but it allows you, for a limited time period, to have potentially 3 different lighter attacks.
Oh, that's cool. I like
That's
that.
That's the way I envisioned it.
Yeah, maybe the attack damage is cut by a third or something when he does that.
Exactly.
So when we looked at this kit, the first thing we looked at too is head games. This cat can pull his head right off his body. So
To me, this was something I was thinking about. Because he can do that, is that a potential attack?
I think it is. It could be a potential charm as well, because as opposed to Jack Sparrow, who may need to get like a little closer to somebody in order to work his charm, maybe he could pull his head right off and throw it at the opponent. And I don't know, Dankle, how would you feel about ranged fellatio? Would that be something you're interested in?
Dencool needs to show his face in the video right now.
I think he's hiding his color, which is red.
He's right now laughing so hard he's trying not to show his face.
Well, I could tell you where to stick it. Anytime you've ever said, I'll tell you where to stick it, or I'll tell you where you can shove it. This guy can actually shove his head up his own ass.
Talk about an asshole.
I think it would be really cool, in all seriousness, if he pulled his head off and, like, bowled it like a bowling ball.
I was thinking the same thing.
It's like chaining damage or adjacent damage to a bunch of characters. That'd be really cool, you know, rather than see him perform illicit acts on a fellow cartoon character.
So let's go into the last one, and this is what I'm curious to get everybody's opinion. Now, Dancool, the man of 1,000 words. What is We're All Mad Here all about?
I don't know. Like, you explain.
Well, I'll tell you what I think. Well, first of all, we got to acknowledge this line comes from the movie where he says, I'm mad, you're mad, we're all mad here, right? So this is all referring to Wonderland in general. I think if Mischievous Grin is a debuff that spreads around, maybe we're all mad here. And this kind of ties into our spells and positions video. I mean, with our positions video, it's so interesting because what we went over, because it's almost like the Kamasutra of Disney Sorcerer's Arena. We go over all sorts of positions, right? So I think we're all mad here. Like to your point, WhoFartd, as far as maybe you pick somebody that targets another person randomly. We're all mad here might randomly swap positions of the enemy team.
So I thought about that. My idea was that it would flip-flop the teams that you control. That you go from controlling your team to you control the opponent and vice versa.
Wow. That is fascinating.
So that's the way I thought.
Into it.
Because I thought that's even beyond like a mind game. That's just total craziness. And really the crux of what, if you've read the real stories, even beyond the movies, the Cheshire Cat is kind of the definition of chaos in the world. And that is exact chaos.
That is really cool. I like that a lot. I'm really excited about this. And here's the cool thing. Fake news aside, I really hope this character comes into the game.
I think that this is a timeless character that has so much potential. Even if he comes in as a spell, it could be a game-changing spell.
Yeah, flavor, I think there's so much cool stuff you could do with this. And that's the important thing. It's not just shaking up meta or making things powerful, but making things fun and interesting. And there's a lot of times where I will choose the more interesting, fun path rather than necessarily the best strategy, just because I like, this is a game. It's supposed to be entertaining. And what's more entertaining than having a cat pop his head off and throw his head
Exactly.
into Dan Cole's lap and soliciting him for inappropriate behavior.
All of a sudden, we've now got the busiest player in Disney Sorcerina history after hearing that.
Exactly. All right, gentlemen, I think that's mainly what we have for this video. Is there anything anybody wants to add before we save the sanity of everybody else who's watching?
I'll just leave it here. Dancool, thank you for joining us. I hope we didn't take away your time from My Little Pony adventures.
You're such a dick.
Well, for those watching, please like, subscribe, and if you have anything you want to see, please leave it in the comments below. If you have opinions on Dan Cool himself, please, we want your comments. All right, Fortnite Gamers signing out.